Hey, welcome everyone. Welcome to Fostering Safe Spaces with me, Rohini. And today we're going to look at exploring and understanding what a safe space means, what can we as leaders do to foster these safe spaces. And with me, I have a very special leader in our midst, Mr. Devian Shah, the MD and CRO of GM Financial Credit Solutions. Welcome, Devian. How are you
Doing
doing?
fine. Good afternoon, Rohini. I'm doing fine. How are you?
Good, good, good. I'm excited to the conversation we're going to have on fostering safe spaces, Devin.
Absolutely.
To begin with, Devin, would you like to share with our audience what do fostering safe spaces means at GM, and why do you see it as so important or critical to an organization's success?
Good afternoon, everybody. I think for me, safe spaces is very important, but let me just break it down. As a father of a teenage boys, I like to talk in demonics. So for me, let me just break down safe, what it means to me. Safe, obviously, historically in our period of time, in terms of workplaces, physical safety is the most paramount. That includes access to facilities, everything from physical space that you're in, and that has to be a bare minimum given across all. So that should be at, I don't think cost should be constrained to ensure that at any point in time. The next and the most, I think, bare platform, the bare share to start would be an active communication for me. Safe space should actively harbor communication amongst peers, amongst leaders, amongst across the chain. So active communication is very important. It's not one way; it is active. So it has to be a thrive, live, organism kind of thing. The communication. Another important aspect being fair treatment, where it's important to ensure fairness across all levels and at all times. And it
Mm-hmm.
has to be a way of thinking, way of acting at all times. It is not just a statement, it's just how you are constructed. And I think the last one would be an encouraging setup, wherein people are encouraged to do things that they feel is right, that they feel are proper to do, without really being having any fear of being reprimanded for doing what is required to be done. So that's very important for me. So that is safe for you.
Sure, sure. Thanks, Devin. What I heard was three important elements: making sure that there is active communication, a
Yeah.
fair treatment, and a sense of feeling encouraged to, speak and feel safe, not to fear negative consequences of doing or saying whatever you have to say. Right. So, tell me, Devin, how do you see this as what kind of an impact fostering safe spaces can have at GM?
I think safe spaces can do two most important things to any organization, including JM.
Mm-hmm.
First is it will make sure that the organization is on a trajectory of growth, unbounded growth, because if people feel safe to do things which are right for growth for the organization,
True.
that is when they will feel encouraged to do what they need to do. So it is like an airplane pilot kind of flying his aircraft, knowing that people have had the safe rails, the guardrails to make sure that a plane will fly properly. So that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of the kind of safety that anybody needs in an organization to fly high. And
True.
another thing it does is it also ensures long-term longevity of the organization. So being safe also means wearing a seat belt, not just driving fast. So it has to mean both those things. One is anybody needs to be feeling uh, safe enough to take those calls, and being safe enough to be protected in case something goes wrong. So both those things will help JM really grow and thrive.
Sure. I love the analogy that you spoke about, whether it's being on a flight or wearing that seat belt while you take risks or while you try out something new, Devin.
Yeah.
So I know, and I'm sure we are aware also that today a lot of organizations, including JM Financial, is experiencing a diversified workforce. We have people across multi generations, across different cultural backgrounds here at work. As a leader, Devian, how do you see ways in which team members can truly feel seen, heard, valued, regardless of, the diverse backgrounds that they come in?
I think the most important, I think what we do humans or as Indians or overall is try to
Mm-hmm.
analyze and dissect it too much. Uh, the best way to address diversity is not to look at it as diversity. It is just to acknowledge everybody as a human in front of you and see what they bring on table for what they're supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't see a person in front of me as junior or senior or where he or she comes from and what their biases or what their inclinations are. Most
Right.
important is to disregard it all and see what the person brings on table and what the person is rather than breaking it down into those DEI elements and seeing. So if you disregard it or just not focus on that and focus on the core part of role in the organization, that's the best way to handle it.
Mm-hmm.
The moment you start focusing on a particular element of diversity and saying how to address this, then it's automatically creating that kind of segregation. So idea is not to look at it in those lenses. Idea is to totally disregard that altogether and be seen for what they are coming
So,
in the
so
organization
what
for.
I'm hearing from you, Devin, is saying that if we as leaders look at individuals in their ability to contribute
Yeah.
and their capabilities and what they bring to work rather than, the denominations or diversity criteria that they carry with them, we're going to be able to see them for what they're worth and be able to treat them with a sense of equity. Correct?
True. Absolutely true. So I don't have a goal in my team or for myself that I need to recruit people with a particular geographical split or particular gender mix and all. I'm open to anybody and everybody who fits in that role rather than being having
Mhm.
a kind of a notion that yes, I need someone like this to do that. So
Right.
it is just not really relevant to me.
Sure, sure. And Devin, today we hear a lot of employees, team members across the corporate space experiencing huge amounts of stress and finding sometimes work demands to be quite overbearing, overwhelming. Keeping this in mind, what would you suggest to leaders to do to encourage people to come and talk and share concerns? Because a lot of employees today bottle up these concerns. They fear that talking about this might work against them. How would you encourage leaders to create that kind of safe space for their team members to walk up to them and share concerns, share if they're feeling too overloaded or stressed out?
I think the key underpinning would remain around the concept I introduced with you for my understanding of what a safe space should stand for,
Mm-hmm.
which is communication, active communication, fair treatment, and encouragement. So if we kind of at all times practice this, then I don't think there should be an issue. The key part is you can see maybe an analogy in maybe a sports person who's really
Mm-hmm.
trained very hard. Look at the stress that he would be going through, getting up at 3 and 4 in the morning, going through the practice drills, and then loving to do it day after day, season after season. Are we able to bring that kind of team together who's really as driven about the goal for the organization, who feels so passionate? And are you the passionate person who kind of passes it down to your team members? Are you that coach? Are you that captain which can at all times keep the team together with the same passion? So it is infectious how you feel about things and how people feel about it based on what you communicate and stand for. So to me, stress is an extension of whether or not you resonate with what you're doing. So long as you resonate to what you're doing and are fairly rewarded, there should be limited room for feeling stressed. So keep the communication channels open and build a passionate team. Then you'll not see those issues.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting perspective, Devin, that a lot of stress and perception of stress can create a big difference in the way one is responding and reacting to that stress. And I like the idea that if as leaders we can model how we can, build resilience for ourselves and our teams, that can go a long way in shaping the perception of how the team responds to these work demands and so-called stress, and take it up more as a challenge rather than something that seems overwhelming. Yeah.
I wouldn't call it so-called stress. Stress is real. We just need to
Mm-hmm.
make sure that the environment is not stressful and people feel one with the goal. Then there is no room for feeling that way. But stress is real, so we need to see how to address the triggers.
Absolutely. And like you mentioned, the active communication,
Yeah.
making sure you're keeping those dialogues open, opportunities open for your team to walk up and speak to you can go a long way for teams to come and share with their leaders when they're really experiencing or reeling under such stress, right?
Sure, absolutely.
So, David, tell me, there are times when, team members might have a very different opinion from their leaders, or they want to challenge the status quo because they closer perhaps to the ground and think that there's a different way of doing things. But many a times hold back because they fear retribution, they fear that it may not be taken in the right spirit by their leaders. How would you encourage leaders to create a safe space where team members can kind of state a disagreement or challenge something if they're not completely convinced with what, the entire team or the leader is proposing?
I think it may seem like a leaked paper, the way I would be kind of responding, but yeah, for me, it is important to first listen to the point of view, even if it's diverse,
Mm-hmm.
uh, process it, and the other person needs to know that I'm processing it. It is not just, yes, I've listened to you, heard you, but I'm watching a CNBC on the side. So make sure you are listening to the person and being with it when that alternate view is being presented, and actually go over and see if there's any merit to it, and then
Mm-hmm.
get back either with the reasoned kind of approach on why you're doing what you're doing, and tell the person that this is what I heard you, I listened to you, but this is why I feel this is the right thing to be done,
Mm-hmm.
and complete the circle of communication so that it doesn't seem like an ad hoc arbitrary action. It
Mm-hmm.
seems like someone really reasoned out and then did what it was supposed to be done. So the entire thing, not to react, is very important, and to process it is equally important. So that's how I would see it being put in practice.
Sure. I particularly liked how you mentioned coming back to that team member, even if you're convinced that that idea may not be possible. Coming back and closing that loop can go a long way to make them feel at least heard, that, my leaders heard me out and has been able to come back to me and share why it's not possible rather than it seemed to be more like my way or the highway, right? So important to close that loop.
Right.
Right. Um, what advice, Devin, would you give to emerging leaders today, especially on this, who are listening to us today, who want to create the safe space for their team members, but don't know where to start? What do you think could be some very practical tips that they could, keep in mind to ensure that they're working towards creating this safe, inclusive space for their team members?
I think I started with an analogy or a background to my own self. I'm a father to two teenage boys.
Right.
So, safe spaces is about the same environment you provide to your children back home.
Mm-hmm.
You want them to go out in the world, take the risks, but you want to offer a platform where a safety net where they can fall back on.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to be overcorrecting, but you need them to know that yes, you're around for something going wrong. So and so offering that classic Indian joint family environment to your team, being around but not being overly patriarchal in the sense that don't want them to make mistake at any cost, but being a coach, guide, and them to know that yes, you have someone having your back at all times, provided they do things which are not grossly incorrect. You don't want them to go out there and go high on drugs or something, but you would want them to go out there, experience life. That's what a safe space is about.
True.
So safe space is creating a family, managing hundreds or tens of teenagers in your family as you manage the team. So
True. I love the analogy that you keep making towards raising teenage sons, which can be equally demanding. So I'm sure, there's a lot of parallels that we can draw. And that requires, giving that opportunity for freedom and exploring, but also making sure that the guardrails are there to ensure they're exploring within safe boundaries.
True.
And we're going to look at seeing if we also have any questions from in the chat, and look at anyone else who's part of this discussion and take a few from there. One of the questions that I see is, there is, like it or not, unconscious bias that sometimes we experience, and that happens, like we said, subconsciously. And how do you suggest leaders get more aware of these subconscious biases that they may carry or their team members may carry? And what could they do to kind of address this, just to ensure that no one becomes at the receiving end or target of this bias?
Interesting. I think, Rohini, what this would mean, and for all leaders, is that to acknowledge that we are also humans and subject to those biases. First and foremost, I need to know that just by becoming a leader, I don't become a superhuman and a most rational guy. So acknowledging that I may have biases is the first thing to do. And secondly, keeping on checking with peers and colleagues with a proper 360 degree and ask them for feedback. Is there somewhere you feel that I'm going wrong? Am I being fair? And have those type of people around you who will give you that candid feedback and then act on it. So having a feedback mechanism at all places is important to ensure that you don't get awry and feel superhuman just because you're a leader. So acknowledge that it's very important that we acknowledge our own limitations and try to cover up by addressing them.
I really like the idea that you just suggested about asking for feedback, because as leaders, traditionally, giving feedback has been part of the role, but having the humility and openness to ask for feedback and then, be able to kind of build that in and weave that in will go a long way to walk the talk. Yeah. How do Devian, there's another question. How do we build resilience, in a generation that sometimes seems a little fragile, or the tendency to take sometimes things too personally when even if it's not intended, something said in jest could have been taken really too personally, and therefore felt like a personal attack, or I felt something that, felt like the environment is not safe enough, or doesn't feel a sense of inclusivity. How do you deal with that, especially with team members who come from, the generation that's entering the workforce today, Gen Zs?
I think generation after generation, there will be a Gen Z which is always entering the workforce. We always feel we are the sandwich generation, but every generation has a sandwich patty to be playing. I think the idea is for each generation, because one would be dealing with someone who is, as a leader, 5 years senior to you as well as 20 years younger to you. So
True.
understanding different forms and modes of communication which works with each of these age groups is very important. And being seen and being actually there is being fair and being seen as being fair are very important things to be done. So which all circles back to the main thing being communication. So uh, there's a one has to be very actively communicating and being in touch with what's required by each set of people, each set of generations, and addressing that. Uh,
Mm.
and just because someone calls me sir or someone calls me by first name doesn't mean anything so long as they mean what the business, they know what's to be done. So, idea is set aside those biases yourself, and secondly, have those lines of communication open in different forms and ways. So, I need to be getting used to interacting on WhatsApp as compared to emails, what I was doing earlier. So this just cultural shift which is there and it's real. So one just doesn't need to impose that this is the way to be done and why don't you do it like that. So being
Sure.
open-minded is a very important part of creating a safe space.
Sure, sure. What I'm hearing from you is they will meet them where they are and be open-minded, feel open to invite dialogue and conversation, even on the things that they might have been offended. If you can, uh, kind of really talk and open up spaces, that's going to go a long way to at least clarify what they took personally or where that gap arose in the first place. Yeah, yeah. I see a question which talks about the MFD role. I'm not quite sure if that's really pertinent here. Okay.
Uh, you could ask the person to follow it up
Yeah.
because while I'm good at giving mnemonics, I'm not good at receiving them.
Yeah, you may need to elaborate what you mean by that so we can help you. I'll take another question in
Sure.
the meantime. How can managers handle situations where employees are feeling, unsafe, and yet they're quite hesitant to come out in the open and, call it out or report it?
I think one needs to be open to reading those signs.
Mm-hmm.
What are those active signs? Are there some changes in someone's behavior? Someone's contributing in meetings? Is someone going silent? Is someone not really speaking out when one was doing it earlier? So there are subtle signs that everybody signs out while not talking openly.
Absolutely.
And one may not know what's bothering, but one will definitely know that something is bothering. So idea is to keep on probing and figuring out, hey, is it all right at home? Something I could do? Is all right with family? Is all right at work? So don't directly ask. I don't know if some people may directly tell you, otherwise just have those coffee conversations with people and try and understand them at individual level, but read for those signs and then try to probe into a bit more. And there could
Sure.
be at times situations which you know are unsettling
Mm.
and which you know are probably gonna cause stress to people. So best is to invite people and say this is what is likely to happen or is happening. So this is my perspective to it. How do you feel about it? Is there something I can do to alleviate your feelings towards it? So talk about the elephant in the room when you know what's the elephant, or else seek out the elephant.
Yeah. I think it just also, what you shared, Devin, reiterates the need to know your team members and watch for what's not being said, uh, and not just what's only being said, right? And talk about areas that teams as a whole might find stress, ambiguity, or concern about, but might be hesitant to voice out. Can we call out that elephant in the room and just make it easier for teams to talk about it?
Right.
Absolutely. All right. I think that was a lot of insight. On a parting note, Devin, what would be, one or two specific guidelines that you'd want to leave for team members this time, so that they feel, because as we know, safety is a space or a function or a dynamic of the team. And while leaders play an important role, it's equally important for team members to trust that this is a safe space and take that risk to open up and share. So, what is it that you would want to share as a parting message to all team members in terms of their way of contributing to this safe space and to encourage them to encourage and be sensitive to their team members' needs and do their role in building that safe space for themselves and others at the workplace?
Yeah, I'll kind of break it in 2 or 3 parts.
Sure.
First is, as anybody, I think safety is not just a thing which has to be played by the leaders. It is across the board.
Absolutely.
So, how safe do I make my colleague feel? How safe do I make my housekeeping staff feel? How safe do I make the security guard feel safe? So overall, everybody can make a contribution to making an organization a safe organization. So it is not only a leader, it's not only the organization, each one of us in what we do, and which will make the whole organization a bit safe and a lot more safe. So everybody can contribute to a safe organization. And the second one would be, while the organization will make all its effort to make the place a safe place, but there's also an accountability on the other hand, on the side, to respect the safety that it provides as a guardrail, wherein by wearing a seatbelt, you just can't drive your car anyways. So you need to be a safe driver, and we will provide you the guardrails to make sure that in case something were to go wrong, we are there to protect you. So it doesn't mean safety to do anything and whatsoever. So one needs to be part of an accountable, play an accountable role, knowing that there's someone to back you up. So safe place means you need to make the organization also feel safe with your own actions.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Devin. I think that was a really, really insightful conversation on fostering safe spaces. All of you who are listening in, do share your takeaways in the comments below. And thank you. I think what I'm taking away from this conversation is definitely create opportunities for open dialogue. Make sure that you know your team members and check in on them formally, informally. And of course, everyone has a role to play. It's not just the leader's prerogative or the organizations. You and me have our own parts to play to make sure that our co-workers and people around us and we're responsible for or connect with feel that sense of safety where everyone thrives. Thank you, Devin, for that really, really interesting conversation. I'm sure all of those who are listening into this conversation have taken some real valuable insights and are going to practice to ensure that they create safe spaces around them. Thank
Thank you
you.
so much. Pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.